What's up, everyone? Thank you for stopping by the channel. I appreciate you all. This is going to be a different video for me because this time I'm talking about Navy Federal and our experience with Navy Federal applying for a mortgage. I want this video to be objective, so I'm just going to give you data from our experience, and then at the end of the video, you get to decide and determine whether or not we were treated unfairly, it was unethical, or Navy Federal was justified in how they treated us in denying us a mortgage. I'll start at the beginning. In 2020, at the height of the crazy housing market where people were just basically going bananas, we entered the market and we started looking for single family homes. Preferably, we were going to build, but because COVID, everything stopped. You remember that, everything just stopped. There was no labor, no materials, no nothing. So we basically changed our direction and then opted for, something that was on the market. Before we started that process, I ensured that we had all our ducks in a row. And what I mean by that is, obviously, credit is an important factor. That's probably the highest, or second to the highest important factor outside of having money. Credit score over 800, okay, which is considered tier 1. The second thing, or step 2, I'll call it, was we put together a wish list. So what do we want in a house? Again, we were going to build, so we already knew how we were going to have the house configured. So we said, okay, if we buy off market, what do we look for? So we put together this list of things and how many square feet we wanted, a backyard, a deck, a patio, soaking tub, fireplace, et cetera, et cetera. So we put together this list of things. Excuse me. Then we said, okay, outside of credit, what are we looking at in terms of affordability? So one of the things that we acknowledged was, okay, let's look at the DTI. Let's look at front end and back end. So front end being gross income, we were at 19%, okay? Mortgage, 19% of gross income. And then on the back end, we said, okay, what is the DTI of net income? So all taxes and everything considered, what are we bringing home to pay for everything else, mortgage and other expenses, gas and electric and groceries and stuff like that. So we went from 19 to 29, which is still in our comfort zone. So we were good on DTI. We understood that. So credit was good over 800, DTI front and back end was good. So we understood that. So based on that wish list, we said, okay, what are we looking at in terms of a home? The overall cost of the home, okay? So the big picture being, what can we comfortably afford? That's in our kind of, financial bracket, on top of down payment, closing costs, taxes, title, insurance, etc. So we came up with a number. We put together a spreadsheet. We said, we're going to track this thing from front to start to end. And after that, after putting together the spreadsheet, we started to interview a bunch of realtors because we said we want to have kind of like a plan A, B, C, and D. So 4. And to be honest with you, we went through a bunch of realtors before we even narrowed it down to 4. I'll save that for another video because I don't want this to be too long. So we found 2 realtors. The first one, you know what, let me put that in the parking lot for right now. I'll explain that a little further down the road here. We essentially opted for 2 realtors that we felt understood, how we were going about the process, and we felt like they were the most helpful. And so I'm going to put that in the parking lot for right now. Then the step after that is we went out and sought 4 different lenders. You might say, why 4? Well, because obviously 2, right? 2 is 1 to us. 3 is 2, 4 is did I say that right? So 2 is 1, 3 is 2, 4 is 3. Okay, so that's right. So we always felt that if we had at least 4 strong lenders, we would be okay in the process in case something fell through the hoops. And this is where Navy Federal comes into play. So as we're going through this process and we're putting bids or contracts on the homes that we like, we're getting outbid by the tune of $50,000 to $60,000 on top of the cost of that, or what the asking price is, before we even start to get to down payments and closing costs. So we were like, this is absolutely ridiculous. We're not playing that game. We're not spending all of our money just to get the house. It doesn't make sense, and particularly because it's not the dream home we wanted to build. So we said, we're not going to go there. We made a promise to one another that regardless of how hard it gets, we would continue the process and we would stay true, right, to our financial position. And so I can tell you, it got a lot frustrating. I was going to say a little frustrating, but it got a lot frustrating for us because we went through that process 9 to 10 times on homes that we toured. Some of them we fell in love with, some of them we really liked, and they were in the best locations with the best schools and close to shopping centers, and it would work out. And again, people were just throwing cash. I mean, tons of cash over and above what the asking price was. And we just felt at this point, we were in for a tough haul. So I mentioned that so that now I can set up where we start to work with Navy Federal. During that process, I mentioned we were putting contracts on homes. We were getting outbid, but we were still putting contracts in. And we got pre-approved from the 4 lenders. And I'll share the 2 biggest ones because they cater to the military, VA. So Navy Federal and Veterans United. Those are the 2 kind of major players that we looked at. And then we looked at 2 lenders who were local to our area. But if you know this about lending institutions, credit unions will always give you the better rate. That's just a fact. Now, I will say, after going through this process, I am no longer a believer in that framework. Credit unions will give you a very good competitive rate, but they are not by any means, at least in our region, the best when it comes to being competitive. So I'll explain that again. Maybe that's another video, but I'll walk you through that in a minute. So we get pre-approved, and all pre-approvals from all 4 lenders are well above what we asked for. We just said, hey, pre-approve us for a home, and we're looking at this and that. And what came back, we were shocked, because it would have taken us out of our comfort zone and what we could afford and pushed us into basically we would be house poor at that point. So we said, absolutely not. But it was good to know that we could apply for that much money over and above what we asked for. Now, each time we put a contract on a home, we actually sent, or I should say alerted, 2 of the 4 lenders. I'm not going to say which ones, not yet anyway. We always alerted 2 of the 4 lenders of what we were doing. So in that process, we would say, hey, here's the house we're looking at. We're going to tour this house. Give us a cost sheet. Now, if you've been through the process before, you understand what a cost sheet is. If you haven't, essentially the lender sends you what you can expect to pay. It's an estimate of the down payment, closing costs, taxes, titles, insurance, etc. So they send it to you, so it's a summary, so you can look at it and say, yep, this is exactly what we would be expecting to come out of pocket in terms of cash and then mortgage and that kind of stuff for this particular property. Now, you can imagine every time we talk to again, it wasn't the same two lenders all the time. It was different. So we would rotate, and that's the reason why we got four. So it wouldn't appear that we would just kind of like going back and forth in this process, and then they would just kind of like basically count us off. So we rotated, but each time, every single lender in that process was very responsive and very competitive. So let's start to talk about where we go with the process. We're at the point now where we're so frustrated, we're just ready to give up. We've talked to other friends and family and friends of friends who were in the process, and they got so frustrated they just dropped out of the market. They said, we just can't take this anymore. It's just too stressful, and they dropped out. We were right there with them. We just happened to, one night we were eating dinner. The lender sends an email and says, hey, I got just the house for you. It's not on the market yet. Take a look at it. Let me know what you think. And so we looked at it and we were like, this is pretty nice. We would definitely be interested in seeing this home. So we did a tour, and right away we were like, we're sold. We really like this home. The location was nice. We looked up the schools, obviously, crime rate and that kind of stuff, and everything was right there in terms of what our needs were. And so we now are at the point where we put a contract in, and we're just praying. And we all went out to lunch that day and had lunch. And the lender calls us and says, I've got good news. They accepted the contract. And we fell out our seats. We couldn't believe, at the height of this crazy housing market where people are just throwing money, that our contract finally got accepted. So here we are, basically stunned and astounded by what's happening, that we're like, yeah, absolutely. Let's get the paperwork flowing. Now, this is what brings us to Navy Federal. And here's where the story starts to get interesting, okay? So we sent the ratified contract to Navy Federal. And again, the reason why we chose to go with Navy Federal is because at that time, and all of the research and talking to people, the credit unions were giving the best rates as opposed to other lenders. And we said, okay, we'd love to do business with Navy Federal. And so we reached out to all four lenders, and we said, hey, we got a ratified contract. We're not going to send it to you yet, but we want you to send us a cost sheet so we can understand what to expect. Here comes the cost sheets. And 3 of the 4 lenders were basically in the same ballpark. And we were like, this is good. This is good, because now they're being competitive. There was one lender who was just bat crazy. That's exactly what we said. This lender's bat crazy if they think we're going to pay this rate, because again, back there in that particular market, rates were averaging 3% and below. And we were just like, we are not paying over 3% for anything. So, Veterans United, we asked for a cost sheet. They sent us the cost sheet, and we had questions about specifics on the cost sheet. I won't go into specifics because I want to be professional and courteous about this. And if there is anything that I think that I can talk about, I'll do that in a different video. But Veterans United sends us a cost sheet. We had questions about 2 particular pieces in that cost sheet. So we sent questions back. Their mistake was they paired us with this lender who was very arrogant and rude, and just, we would ask for information. He would respond asking us for information, and we're like, where are we going with this? Like, we're asking you for specifics. And it was like he actually said to us, show me the other lender's, cost estimate, and then we'll go from there. Otherwise, nobody beats my service. And we were like, okay, if this is how you're acting, even before we get started, we can only imagine what it's going to end up looking like if we decide to go with you. So we crossed, and Veterans United, I hope you're listening. I hope you see this video. You were not even an option at that point, because we just felt like the person we were working with that was representing your company was just so arrogant, not a touch, that we would never work with that person. So we crossed them off the block early on in the process. So now we're down to 3. And again, we started with 4. We kept saying, if there's something that goes wrong in this process, we would at least have a plan A, B, and C, and D. Now we're on to plan B. So we reach out to Navy Federal as our first choice, and we say, hey, we got a ratified contract. And you're like, oh, that's wonderful. Send us the contract. Upload all of your documents, your current documents, because again, this, from the time that we started the pre-approval until the time we got the ratified contract, is almost a year later. Okay, so each month we were putting a contract on the house, basically. Now we're basically 12 months, away from that initial kind of uploading those documents. So Navy Federal just wanted current documents. Fair enough to me, because things could change in 12 months. So we upload the most current financial data. Everything's fine. Now it goes to underwriting. And we're excited. We are like basically now planning the relocation. So we're getting all of those kind of like variables, starting to get those processed. You got to move, you got to change address, you got to start like electricity, you got to do this. And we were keeping the house that we were in so that we can rent it out, right? So that became basically a rental property for us. So now we're saying, okay, we're leaving the furniture we had there, which was really good furniture, and we're just going to buy new furniture. So a week goes by, we don't hear anything. We're getting a little anxious about it, because we're figuring, okay, great credit, I mean, decent income, we've got the cash, okay, down payment, closing costs, taxes, title, insurance, everything's there. The DTI, 19 front end, 29 back end, we're there. We're a tier 1 buyer. So second week comes along, and it's kind of like business as usual. We don't hear anything back from Navy Federal. So we're like, screw this. We reach out. Hey, it's been almost 2 weeks now. Can you give us a status update? And the agent says, oh, okay, let me get with the underwriter and, see what's going on. The next day we get a phone call that says, hey, you've been denied. Now, you can imagine the shock that we were in. We got the pre-approval for well over what we asked for. We sent all the information in, the ratified contract, all of our financial pieces were in place. Again, we're a tier 1 buyer. And week 2 into the process, basically Navy Federal stopped communicating with us. We had to follow up. Then we get the, you've been denied. The obvious next question is, why? What happened all this time? Now it's in underwriting and we get denied. Like, help us make sense of this. This is just not adding up. And what we got was, you have a poor performance history with Navy Federal. No, we don't. We have a poor performance history at Navy Federal? What are you talking about? And so the agent says, well, let me get a little bit more information and then I'll get back to you. So about an hour later, she calls back. And by the way, the person that we were working with in terms of like the sharing all the financial data, she was the nicest individual you can ever talk to. Very nice. So she calls back the next day and she says, you had a credit card back in the early 90s. Navy Federal gave you a credit card with a limit of $1,400 back in the early 90s. you defaulted on that credit card. It went to collections, and so they put that on your account, and it went to collections. And I said, I remember that from the 90s. I was a service member in the 90s. I was deployed. And again, all this stuff starts coming back. So I'm the kind of person, I don't throw away any kind of paperwork. I have stuff in my closet, locked up in my closet, from the early parts of my military career, all through my military career, and then post-military career. So I keep stuff like that. I keep electronically now, but I have the stuff that before computers became the thing that I keep in my, basically in my storage closet. So I said, you know what? I remember that. That was over 25 years ago. And she says, it's an internal policy that if you ever had any kind of poor performance, with Navy Federal, it's on your record forever. It never goes away. And so the question that we were asking the agent was, we're talking about $1,400 versus a several $100,000 mortgage. Is there anything we can do to satisfy the $1,400? We even asked that question, and she said, I don't know, but it wouldn't change anything. And we were like, what? If we satisfied the $1,400 to take that off of our kind of record, that wouldn't change? Being a tier 1 buyer at this point, taking out a several $100,000 loan. Just again, we're like so confused. We're looking at each other going, this doesn't make sense. So I went back through all that paperwork. It took me more than a couple of days. Okay. I went back. I actually found a letter from the collection agency that said, you have satisfied this outstanding debt. I found the letter. I called the lady back and I said, hey, I got a letter in front of me that says I satisfied this collections for Navy Federal. Here's the date and everything. She refers me to a customer service department that management takes care of. So somebody in leadership oversees this department, and I spoke directly to that person. Once more, I would like to say that this person in leadership, very cordial, very nice, very professional, listened to me, gave me good information, and I couldn't ask for more than that. So in all fairness, the people that I spoke to within Navy Federal were very professional, very polite, very polished. So we're going back and forth, and even she says, it doesn't make sense. She says, but that's our internal policy. And I said, I understand. I said, it's a shame that there's nobody really looking at this. Like if it's all computers kind of like, and it's some kind of algorithm that poor performance pops up on the record, and regardless of whether or not you're a tier 1 and you've got the financial ability to afford this, we're not going to do it with you because of this ding on your record that happened over 25 years ago. Now, if you look at it, big picture, 25 years ago, I was this young, dumb person that didn't really understand credit or the impact of it. I was a service member. I was out basically, protecting my country. And in the process, you know what? I made a mistake. I own up to that. Because again, when she mentioned it to me, I said, oh, I do remember that. I was a young dude, going out, hanging out with my friends. I would use the card. And when we got deployed, that was the last thing on my mind was and back then there wasn't like this, you had I'm drawing a blank, but you had a direct deposit that could go to Navy Federal. I didn't have that set up back then because I was always home to pay the bill. And when we got deployed, we were out for a while. I come back and I start having these letters that say, hey, you were defaulted because blah, blah, blah. But nobody ever asked me, hey, were you deployed? And can you send us proof and we'll just take this out and then you can just keep paying it. Nothing to that fact. It was just, hey, went to collections, now you deal with them. Wow. Okay, so that's how you treat your service members. Again, I was a young dude. I take responsibility for it. It was my fault. But again, the expectation that somebody my age at the point would be more responsible with a $14 credit card, that's asking a lot, especially from a service member that was deployed for a while. So, with that said, I spoke to the two people in Navy Federal. I showed them the proof. We talked about options, and everything came back to, sorry, you've been denied. We weren't even angry at that point. We were just like, okay, you know, one pony doesn't stop the show here. So we went to lender two. Now again, Veterans United at that point in the process, we had just canceled them out altogether because of that rep that they put in touch with us. Veterans United was out of the game. Navy Federal is out of the game unexpectedly. So now we go to the local lender and we're like, hey, we got a ratified contract here. What can you do? And that local lender not only beat Navy Federal, which was the lowest one at that point, okay, beat Navy Federal, but got all the paperwork done in the quickest amount of time possible, and we were able to close without issue. So I wanted to share that story with you. Now you have all the information, you have all the facts, all of that happened. You be the judge on whether or not Navy Federal was racist, unethical, they missed an opportunity, which we actually believe they did. They could have made way more than that $1,400 that they basically just kind of keep on their records, because again, over 25 years later, I'm not the same person with financial management as I was back then, being a new service member. So let me know in the comments what you think about what I just shared. And, again, were they unethical? Were they racist? Did they just miss an opportunity? Let me know. I'd love to hear your comments. And if there's other things that you have questions about, put those down there too, and I'll respond to them as I can. Again, thank you for stopping by, and I definitely appreciate you.